Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Neil, it's been a while. Haven't been here for about a month. How's your summer going?
Oh, everything's peachy down here in South Carolina, but it's sticky and sweaty. And luckily, I'm not near Hurricane Betty, but things are pretty good. How about way up there in West Hartford, Connecticut?
Pretty warm here as well. As a matter of fact, the last time we were on about a month ago, I had the blue Hawaiian shirt on, and I know you were so taken by it. I was going to come out with the coral this time, but decided to go a little bit more conservative today.
If we could just run some Gilligan's Island in the background, we'd have everything completely taken care of with those shirts.
We sure would. Well, we got a great show in store today. First, we're going to be joined by the president of hockey operations for the Philadelphia Flyers, Keith Jones. His team made it within a day of making it to the Stanley Cup playoffs. They were one of the great surprises around the league. So we're going to talk to him first. And then we're going to talk team building and philosophy with author, award-winning podcast host, and team building expert both here and abroad, Lee Elias. But first, the college and pro football seasons are on the horizon, and right behind that, the 24-25 NHL season will be coming up. No better time to add to your game-worn apparel collection, and we're going to tell you how.
From Howe to Hughes, from Bellevue to Bedard, we're your source for game-worn jerseys. Go to mygray.com, MEIGRAY.com, to start your collection today. Get real. Get it from iGray.
Well, Vic, we're lucky to have our old buddy Keith Jones join us today from the Philadelphia Flyers. Jonesy, it's great to have you after your first year of being the president of hockey operations back in Philadelphia, where you've spent so many years. How was it for you?
It was great, Neil. It's great to see you guys as well. Fantastic start. Really felt comfortable. It was a new challenge. It was great for the mind. And I'm just really excited about where things are headed and, being back amongst our fans and recognizing so much of what our city appreciates and how important winning is. I think all those aspects of my experience around the town give me a pretty good idea of where we need to get to in order to put hockey back on the map. So I thought it was a very good start, but also recognize that we have a lot of work to do.
The most important thing that we got to mention right off the top is that you're a new grandfather and you've got a little granddaughter, and she's in Florida. And how's that? How does that feel, by the way, to be a grandfather?
It's incredible. It really is. And it's a little boy. The name is Nikita. Yeah, the name's Nikita, so it does get mixed up. But I guess my daughter's a huge Nikita Kucherov fan, so it's interesting. There's no Russian connection to on the father's side either. So it's an interesting name. So we'll have to see where this little guy goes. But it's a great feeling. Just an absolute blessing, and I'm so thrilled to be able to be down here at this time of year, having a break in Florida where we have a home and our daughter lives about 20 minutes away. So a chance, timing wise, to be, when the league is a little more quiet, to be down here and get a chance to hold my grandson has been pretty cool.
If he takes off his baby shoe and starts smacking it on the table, you'll know why he got named Nikita, because those of us that are real old remember Nikita Khrushchev.
Yeah, that's right, too. That's right. I was thinking of Milbury when I was thinking of Shoe-Off, too, when you brought that name up.
First hockey question for you. I have to ask you this. So, you and Danny go in there, Danny Briere, the general manager, and then you as the president of hockey ops. it's a little bit odd because you've already got the coach is already there and established and was hired by Chuck Fletcher, the previous GM. And as we all know, Torts is he knows how to establish a culture. He knows how to get things going. He's been around a long time. He, all the way back to the Tampa Bay Lightning and winning the cup back then in 2004. Obviously, he's started to set the culture there before you guys even showed up. So how does that work? How do you mold together with an established coach and try to bring the Jones-Briere culture in and wrap it around the Tortorella culture?
Yeah, I think, the fact that he was there made it a lot more enticing for me to join. I watched the previous season and watch the improvements that were made, watch the ground that was, gained as far as developing that locker room, developing a style of play. I've always had a great appreciation for the way Torts does his job. And like with you, I got to know John through TV. We worked together at TSN. So we had a long-standing, friendship, but also respect. And I was always a big fan. I'm a bigger fan now after working with him for a year. He has been just outstanding to deal with. He has his moments of entertainment at times, and there's so many great moments that he provides so much leadership to our team that it's just been a really positive experience, and I'm not surprised by any of it. He would have been the hire for me. I made that clear. I was thrilled when the team hired him when I was doing television because I thought he would be the right guy to get the job done. So that was not an issue at all for me as far as the process in taking the job. And it's not been an issue since taking the job. We've got a really good collaborative relationship. And Danny's obviously a gigantic part of that as well. But the three of us, along with Dan Hilford, who was obviously in charge of all of us, have a very good working relationship. And it's like everybody's kind of pulling on the same rope in order to try to get this thing right.
Keith, I think one of the interesting things about Torts is in year one, there was kind of more of a defense first mentality. And then last season, he opened the style up to make it more attack, more counter, which really shows a great evolution for him as a head coach, since he's always been kind of known more for the defensive part of the game. And for him to change that around and make the team more offensive was somewhat of an evolution for him. But where I'm going with this is the team is still pretty strapped offensively. You were 15th in the conference, 27th overall in goals scored last season. Matvei Michkov, your first overall pick in 2023. Big expectations, but in reality, what are your expectations of him to help augment this offense in the 24-25 season?
Well, I think he's going to be an incredibly fun player to watch play. I think our fans are going to appreciate that. He thinks the game differently. He is a unique talent. That all being said, he's going to need help. And I think we have a really solid group of veteran players around to insulate him, to give him the opportunity to be himself on the ice at times, but also learn from, a really solid group of guys and how to play the game, how we play the game, and also provide him a great spot to continue to grow his game. He's only 19. So we have a very solid perspective on what we think we're going to get from him and what we want to get from him. And the fact he's there already getting, to know all of his teammates, developing those relationships. He's just the type of kid that dives right in. He wants to be great, and he's going to do everything he can to do that. And we're going to do all we can to help him do that. But at the same time, having him here now and getting the opportunity to, start his National Hockey League career, with a team that's not, torn down to nothing. We have a lot of good players around and a lot of good wingers that he can learn from. And he provides us something that we lack. There's no question we need to improve our power play, which was bottom in the league. And we need to do a better job of playing down low in the offensive zone, which is one of his strengths. So, like you mentioned with John, the defense was fixed in the first year for the most part. The play on the rush was really enhanced last year with our style of play. And now we have a couple of other areas that we need to improve upon as a group. And it's going to be a focus, I'm sure, in the way that Torts runs his practices. Much like last year was a lot on the rush, I'm sure there'll be a lot of down low offensive type creation drills that are going to help us, take that next step. So as a team, we continue to build, but Michkov certainly gives us another option.
Do you see him on the power play on either the first or second?
I do. I think he's that gifted. I mean, it's just when you watch him, even when he goes on the ice by himself, it's just amazing to see how he approaches the game. And I played with great players. I was fortunate enough to be on the same line as Leclerc and Lindros. Fortunate to play with Forsberg and Sakic in Colorado. And they think differently, these guys. And he's the type of guy that wants to get better at every aspect of the game. He's never satisfied. And every drill that he takes part in, whether by himself or amongst a group, he's trying to, have a purpose when he makes a decision with the puck. And it's hard to describe. It's something to see. And I know if you guys watched him up close, and obviously you'll get a chance to next year, you'll get a better understanding of how his brain works. It's off the charts offensively. So I'm really excited about him. And I can't wait to watch him grow in an environment that should be really conducive for him to become a star player at some point in the near future.
Jonesy, I want to flip back 2 or 3 years ago when you were doing color commentary and also, doing all your national broadcasting and that. My opinion of the Flyers 2 and 3 years ago was that one of the gems that they had, of the very few gems that they had back then, was their goaltender in Carter Hart. Now, Carter Hart is no longer with the Flyers for reasons that we won't go into, but you do have 2 goaltenders now in Sam Ersson and Ivan Fedotov, the rather large goaltender that you started last year. Tell me, what are your thoughts about your goaltending? Because you've had this upheaval. You've gone from the guy who was going to be the Bernie Parent, let's say, and he's gone now. And now you've got Ersson and Fedotov. How's your goaltending going to be?
I think we saw some really good signs from Sam last year as the backup, playing in, some pretty important games for us. Probably played too many. In fact, he did. I think he started to get a little worn out by the end. The combination of us lacking some bodies on the blue line after we traded Sean Walker and had some injuries on the back end to Ristolainen, Drysdale, and Sanheim was banged up as well. And Sealer was hurt. So it wasn't a great time for us to try to help him continue to grow into a number one netminder. He has the mindset, Neil. He's an extremely focused kid that wants to be successful, but seems to have a pretty good idea of how to be successful at that position. So I thought he was impressive last year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do this year. Fedotov was a wild card. I mean, he arrived, he didn't even have his own equipment. He's 6'7", and we're throwing him in the net because, Sam started to falter a little bit near the end of the season, and he's on the bench, so why not play him, right? So he jumped in and was never comfortable in the 3 or 4 appearances that he made. He's been with us all summer. He's worked extremely hard at getting better in some of the areas our goaltending coach, Kim Dellenbaugh, felt like he needed to work on. So I'm impressed with his work ethic, and I'm excited about seeing where it takes him next year. With that size and the athletic ability that he has, he should be able to really perform well. But he did miss an entire year going back 2 seasons ago when he was in doing his military service in Russia. He didn't play hockey. So I think last year he was okay. I would expect him to be a lot better this year. And I think we could really benefit from that. So I'm excited to see where his game goes. And we do have a couple of other young netminders that are growing. Karsten Bjarnason hopefully will be part of the Canadian World Junior team. He was a second round pick for us in 23. And Yegor Zavragin was a goalie we picked right after him, who may turn out to be an absolute stud. So we're going to have to keep tabs on him. I think he'll play in Sochi this year in the KHL. And he's another young, talented netminder that's coming up in the system. So there is depth there and balance. And I do think the future is bright in that regard. So we'll continue to try to work at that and provide the guys that we have the best opportunity for them to succeed.
Do you see yourself adding maybe a veteran goaltender? Because Urson has really not been a true number one. He was forced into that role last year. But do you see yourself adding anybody?
I don't. I think we're happy with what we've seen from Sam and where we project him to get to. And we're in no rush to add a goaltender to that mix right now. We're kind of in a position of patience as we continue to try to grow and get better. We're not fooling ourselves. We don't think we're winning the Stanley Cup. But we're not going to approach any single game not trying to win. So we're going to continue to push our guys. We want them to play in a winning environment, and we want our younger players to kind of grow up together. And when they start hitting the age of some of the Florida Panthers players who just won the Stanley Cup, we want that to, we want them to be fully, growing. We want to enhance their abilities. We want them to be at a mature part of their career where they can take us to the next step. And we've got a lot of young guys that we project to be in a position to do that, like Tyson Forrester. Obviously, Konechny's going to be with us for, the next 9 years, and we're thrilled about that. Morgan Frost continues to develop. There's a good core group of younger players that are growing up together, and we're really looking forward to watching York, Drysdale continue to develop on the back end as well.
And it's great that you guys are sticking to the philosophy that you would preach last year and just trying not to get too much over your skis before it's time to do so. So certainly great in that regard. But I want to now take you back to your broadcasting career a little bit, because, you spent over 2 decades as an NHL TV analyst around the NHL. And a couple of your players, Eric Johnson and Garnet Hathaway, attended the NHL broadcast training camp back in July. So have they come to you for any pointers or any suggestions on how to make it in this field, perhaps once they're retired?
I did talk to Hath about it the other day. He was thrilled. He was really happy to go and get that experience, and good for him to take advantage of that. I think Neil and I would both agree. We wish we had that when we got started, because you're kind of thrown into it, and I purposely avoid any of my first year's tapes. I can tell you that, because I knew I was horrendous, sweating through the suit and just trying to be somebody that you're not. It takes a while to get used to being on camera for most people. There is some that jump in and are incredibly good right from the start. Like Henrik Lundqvist is a great example of that. Patrick Sharp was another one that I worked with that I was really impressed with, and feel fortunate that he's working for us now. But there's growing pains with it. So I think it's really important that the players get a chance to do those type of camps and, develop some other skills and get the mind working about things that they can do after their career ends, because there is only so many jobs. And I know Neil knows this from his time, especially in New York, where when you're in a position like Neil was in and like I'm in now, everybody is looking for work. And a lot of the guys are your good friends, and it's very difficult to say no. But everyone is always trying. So you just have to keep on knocking and hope that something opens up for you. And that's my advice to players when they retire is stay in the game as close as you can. Don't worry about what you're making right away and don't leave, because when you leave, it's very difficult to come back.
We're going to keep Keith around here because we have Lee Elias joining us, and he is a team building coach. And we want to just get into a little bit of philosophy, not so much with the Flyers, but just in general, how you build teams, how you build leadership. So we're going to do this right after a word from our sponsor.
Time now for a quick shout out to our sponsor. NHL Wraparound is brought to you by Matvei, your source for game-worn jerseys. Head to mygray.com to get your collection started today. Get real, get it from Matvei. NHL Wraparound subscribers can take 10% off any hockey jersey when they order at mygray.com and use the coupon code WRAP10. Don't forget that coupon code WRAP10.
And welcome back to NHL Wraparound. Vic Morren, along with Neil Smith, and our special guest, the president of hockey operations for the Philadelphia Flyers, Keith Jones. And now we are pleased to also welcome in award-winning author, award-winning podcast host in 2023 and 2024 for Our Kids Play Hockey. He is a championship team building coach, both here and abroad. He is the CEO of Hockey Wraparound and the Game 7 Group. Lee Elias, welcome.
Vic, thanks so much for having me. That was a heck of an intro, man. I don't get to hear that from other people too much, but when you say it, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and I was actually telling the truth here. So before we start, know that you are actually familiar with Keith Jones from a previous encounter, and I'd like you to share that with us.
Yeah, Jonesy, first off, great to be here with you today. It really is an honor. But as Vic said, this is actually not the first time we've met. I've got a little story for you. We're going to go back to April 9th, 2010, and I don't remember the date because of the day I met you. I remember that date because the Flyers and Rangers were deadlocked in an end of season home and home, and the winner of those games would end up going to the playoffs. It was the first time, as you know, a shootout winner would decide it. But we're at Madison Square Garden the day before, and I was privileged to be working for the Rangers at the time. And I always got to the Garden early because that's a magical place. Neil, you know that as well. And I was roaming around the arena, as you do as a young professional, and there you were, sitting in the stands, right? So I go, I'm going to introduce myself to Keith Jones. So I walk up to you, and I want you all listening to imagine this. I pull up my Rangers vest, and I start unbuttoning my shirt. And you're looking at me like, what the hell is this guy doing? And I said, Mr. Jones, I just need to show you this. And again, Ranger fans, you're going to be upset about this. I pulled open my shirt to unveil a Flyers logo because I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I remember you looked right at me, smiled, and you go, "We're everywhere." And that was the first time we met. It was funny. A wonderful moment.
Oh, what a small world, eh? That's great.
It is.
That's a beautiful story. I love that.
We've come full circle now, and I'm sitting on this amazing podcast with you as a team builder. And Jonesy, I just have a few questions. They gave me 25 minutes, and I want to make sure that I get as much out of this as possible from a team building standpoint, a culture standpoint. I'm also told I'm the first person to bring a prop on this show. For those of you listening, I'm holding up Jonesy's book, aptly titled Jonesy. Keith, I was reading this book actually on the train to New York every day when it came out. And, when working with teams, we established that trust, communication, accountability are primary pillars for building a team bond. And I think you've balanced all that throughout your career as a player and a professional, right? One of my favorite chapters in this book, and I don't know why this one always stood out to me, was titled I'm -7. And I remember reading this on the train, like I said, and what stood out to me from that chapter, and it goes into your time about really trying to break into the league, was the balance that you had at a time when you were really striving to make it, between your own stats, as the title suggests, but also taking care of your team, your teammates taking care of you, and also doing everything possible just to make it. So where does that mix come from, and how do you cultivate something like that?
That's a really good question. It's not something that I get asked often. I can tell you that. when I look back at the -7 game, which Barry Trotz was the head coach, I was playing in Baltimore. I will never forget the game, obviously. We lost 10-8. I think it was against Utica. They scored an empty net goal, and the buzzer went before the puck went over the goal line. So it should not have counted. So I chased after the referee, and I was verbally giving it to the ref, and Paul Gardner was an assistant coach, and he grabbed me after. He goes, "Who cares? It's 10-8, or 9-8. We lost. The game's over." I said, "Well, I'm -7. I care." And we had this argument about it. So anyway, I got called up to the NHL the next day after a -7 performance. So I never stopped believing that I would get there. I was just so determined to play one game. It wasn't about playing a National Hockey League career. It was about playing one game. Being a 7th-round pick drafted out of Junior B, you kind of figure out different ways to survive each step along the journey. And a lot of that has to do with being a good teammate, recognizing your role, understanding what you do well to make other players better, and realizing who you are as a player. And I knew that I used to argue with my mom, who has passed, and we would have these conversations when I was younger. She'd say, "You're a great player." I said, "Mom, I'm not a great player. I'm a good player, and I can make great players better, but I'm not a great player." And it would show every year in training camp after each season in the NHL. They would always put me with 2 younger players to give them some experience with a top guy, and I was horrendous, and I made them worse. You put me with top players, I could make them better. I could make them laugh. I could make them, play to their strengths. I could distract for them. And once in a while, I could make a play. But I wouldn't have got those opportunities if I didn't recognize who I was. So I do think that part of building a team is having players who do things differently and then trying to put all the pieces together. Obviously, star players, are a big factor in winning Stanley Cups, but how you enhance their play is really important. And recognizing players that have, I guess you would call it the it factor, really matters. And realizing that before you move them or don't re-sign them, or, if you do that, that's on you. If you've made mistakes, and everyone has, and the player excels somewhere else, that means you missed something. So I do think you have to be on top of it. I think you have to watch pretty much every minute of every day. It's when you talk about culture, to me, it's like a living, breathing thing that can change at any moment. And if you're not around to recognize it, you can be in a tough position. So, a lot of it has to do with my career, what I did to make it, and recognizing who I was as a player, but also recognizing what other players do well and trying to enhance that. I think that's a big part of building a team and building your culture of your team.
Yeah, well, look, I'll say this. I know what you're saying about great players versus good players. I think great people make other people great. And I think you've done that throughout your career. I think that's echoed in your book. And you're actually perfectly leading into my next question, which I love, right? You talked a little bit about the Flyers culture in the previous segment, which was fantastic. In my team building work, I think the Flyers are doing a masterclass in both identity and culture building, right? The re-emergence of those two aspects has clearly been a priority for leadership, in addition to building the personnel on the ice. So here's a question for you. What are the questions and conversations that are taking place internally that we may not see that make that a priority? Again, I'm not looking for insider information. I'm looking what are those key questions that are asked that we don't see when we're watching on TV?
The key answer to all that, Lee, is that those conversations take place. It's not one individual making those decisions. I'm the president of hockey operations. John Tortorella doesn't work for me. Danny Briere doesn't work for me. They work with me. And if we don't have that type of structure, it's not going to work. So we're trying to thread a needle here. We're trying to, on the fly, become a competitive team again without going to the bottom. And we're not in a position in Philadelphia that we can afford to go to the bottom. We have to continue to build upwards. And without everyone's opinion being considered, it's going to be hard to do. So we talk a lot. We're together a lot. Both Danny and I go to most every game, including on the road, unless there's a priority scouting trip that needs to take place. One of the two of us is 95% of the time with the team, with Torts, with the coaching staff, and in conversation with the players all the time. Like, we are always in the room, skate days, we're in the gym just visiting with the guys. There's not a moment that goes by where a player doesn't have an opportunity to come and talk to us about how they're feeling, what we can do better to help them enhance their productivity. There's projects being done throughout the organization for individual players to make sure that we're using every aspect of analytics to make them understand where they'll have a better opportunity to score from and to produce from. So it's doing everything. It's crossing the T's, dotting the I's, but doing it together. And I think that's what is eventually going to get us where we need to go. It's not overreacting to noise. It's recognizing the difference between noise and news and trying to balance all those things in order to keep our fans appreciating what we're doing, because they're critically important to what we do. And at the same time, providing them an entertaining product that they can watch with the eye on the future and see where we're going. And we're trying to share that with our fans as much as we can, and being honest with them as much as we can in order to make sure that they feel like they're a part of this process as well.
Yeah, I think you've definitely accomplished that. I mean, the feeling in Philadelphia for this team right now is kind of the way you described it. Of they're coming right, they're going the right way, right, and that's the direction you want to go in. This next question is for both you and Neil. In my line of work as a team builder, the misconception that I always have to explain to people is that all pro sports teams have a team culture. And that's actually not true, right? You see this at times that certain teams don't have it. There's problems that happen in the locker room. So again, question for both of you. What are some of the red flags that you've seen from both a player and organizational standpoint that can threaten or break a team culture and bond? And adversely, what are some of the hallmarks of great team cultures and team players?
I'll go first, Jonesy. I mean, in my time in the NHL, I think it's an easy thing to recognize. Everything starts at the very, very top. And if you have somebody at the top who, for example, the owner or the owner's guy who doesn't know how to build a good culture, doesn't know how to do teamwork, doesn't know how to share in the good times and the bad times, doesn't know how to motivate people to want to put in the long hours that you got to put in when you're in sports, which are incredibly long. And that goes from everybody from the coach all the way through to the secretary that stays there right through the games at night and stuff. If you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to build your culture, because you can't go down to level 2 or level 3, for example, within the organization, say, okay, let's start building the culture at the general manager. It can't happen. If the guy above the general manager, be it the owner, be it the president, be it the corporate guy, if he doesn't want to build that culture and he doesn't know how to build the culture, it's almost going to be impossible for you to get it done, because everybody's got to work together. So that's a real red flag that I see in the NHL right now. And without mentioning names of teams, we all know who they are. We all know there's teams out there that obviously don't even have a culture. They don't know what they're doing. Where are they headed? What's going on? You look at who they've hired and you're like, what are you doing? Like, where did it come into your head to hire that guy? And then that guy will hire some wrong hires as well. And it'll just keep going down the chain. So that's the red flags that I see from the outside. From the inside, and I'll be quicker on this, you've got to stay on top of it every minute, every day, like Keith said. But the thing you've got to look for is, You got to listen to the trainers and listen to the assistant coaches and listen to the locker room attendants and listen to everybody and try to get as much intel as you can about which is a square piece that you're trying to put into a round hole, which is a round piece that you're trying to put into a square hole, which just doesn't fit. Who's talking about the same guy over and over again? And what are we going to do? And then you go back, as Keith said, you go back with your partners in crime that are there with you, your coach, your assistant GM, your whoever, and you start talking about this. And are you hearing the same thing I'm hearing about so-and-so? And this isn't good. This isn't good. I mean, so-and-so's wife hates so-and-so's wife. Like, that doesn't work. You saw that in Ottawa a few years ago, if you remember, with Eric Carlson and one of the other players. Anyway.
And Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my answer to that. You've got to keep your ears and eyes on it all the time, but you don't stand a chance if the guy above you, and Jonesy can speak to this, if the guy above you doesn't understand the concept of building culture and doesn't understand you've got to have a good culture, you got no chance. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's a great opinion. And I'm very fortunate. The individual that hired me, his name is Dan Hilferty. He's our CEO. He is an incredibly talented leader and has great insight on some of the things that Neil just talked about. He's allowing us to, do our thing, but at the same time wants to be involved, wants to be around the team, wants the players to know him. He will come into the locker room after games. And he is, we're owned by Comcast, but Dan Hilferty is, our owner. He's the guy that we all go to. And there's a very interesting dynamic that comes from that. He's on top of it. He's there. He's within, our locker room a lot. It's an open door policy between business and hockey ops, which has been unusual around Philadelphia. That's kind of a new thing. And it's worked seamlessly, and so much of it has to do with him and the people that he hired. Knowing what I discovered while working for the team for many years and doing their color commentary, I would hear so much stuff, and it's stuff that I didn't want to hear. I wasn't looking to hear it. It was coming to me, and it was negative. So I had a pretty good head start on recognizing that we had to fix the messaging that was coming out of not just the locker room, but out of the business side as well. People were unhappy. They weren't proud to work for the Philadelphia Flyers. And, when you leave the building from your office desk or the arena as a player, take your gear off and leave, if the first couple people you see that come to talk to you about the Flyers, your message is negative, it goes through the entire city. And that's what was happening. The Flyers were becoming a team that was never talked about. It was just nothing. There was an emptiness, and that's something that we wanted to change. Now the bar was low. I mean, we had an advantage. So recognizing that and knowing that you can't do it by yourself, I think were really important. I think that's why we've early on had a good start in that regard, but also recognize how far we have to go in order to keep regaining the trust of not just our fans, but our employees, and making sure that we make it a great place to be again. I think in doing that, we're going to see great benefit and results in the end. So I do think Neil made some great points there about what it's all about.
Well, and you said it too. It's a living thing. I think this is where a lot of teams, and I'm not just talking sports now, I'm talking everything. You said the corporate side. This is where teams fall apart, right? There's a pulse, and you got to be able to read the pulse as well as a doctor can read a pulse. If there's no pulse, you're not alive, right? And I think that there's a clear pulse coming out of Philadelphia right now, and with more than one team. But the point is there's a pulse, and it's being read. And you got to know if it's a healthy pulse or not. Jonesy, I do want to ask you this too, kind of along these lines of just team culture broadly, right? To be great at something, you have to have talent. That's a given. But as we've discussed, the type of person you are, you did this in that first question, is just as important as the player or teammate that you are. A lot of my work now started with professional teams, but I'm getting a lot of interest and work with young youth teams, youth organizations. So how much emphasis do you believe youth hockey organizations should be putting on incorporating team building and culture building? And I'm not really just talking about pizza parties and just, going out to Chuck E. Cheese's, if those still exist, into the program. I'm talking about real in-depth, talking about trust, communication, accountability, the difference between responsibility, commiseration, and having a good conversation. Is that something youth organizations need to be putting more time into right now?
I don't think you can ever not put enough time into it. No, I just think that's something that you should exhaust as much energy as you can in trying to get that right. A lot of the young people that come out of those programs that are doing it right end up finding a way to make it to the NHL or, in the business world, or finding a great career after college hockey, whatever it might be. The ones that are a big part of allowing a team's culture to develop, and because of the way they act and because of how alert they are and recognizing when somebody needs to talk, needs to, a helping hand in order to improve, how they're feeling about themselves or how they're feeling about how they're playing. The two things go hand in hand. So I do think that those type of players are important. And I think Neil would agree with this. There is some luck involved when you're drafting. We all want great people. We want great people. We do. We want them to grow up and be outstanding young men or women, and we want them to just, do great things. But there's luck. I mean, you can't know every detail about every player, although you can know more than I think you could ever before. If you're out there pounding the pavement and you have the resources to pay for a, premier scouting department that can really dig in and talk to people like you, Lee, that are associated with kids and teams and growing. I think all of those things are extremely important. But I do acknowledge that there is a little bit of luck. Like, we had luck this year in the draft. We drafted just great kids. They showed up at development camp and you get to know them a little bit better, and you walk away from talking to them or watching them interact with their friends and you go, wow, that's really cool. Like, that's great. They're good hockey players, but they're really good people. And I can't tell you that we knew every one of them inside out before, but we had a pretty good idea. But just to see how they operated was awesome. And then now we have a foundation to continue to build with those kids at every development camp that they come to. And some will progress quicker to the National Hockey League, usually their earlier picks. And the others we'll keep an eye on, because those 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, once in a while, they find their way to the National Hockey League. We want to do all we can to make sure that we enhance them.
Yeah, we talk a lot on my show. A lot of hockey parents listen to that show, right? And we talk about the importance of, look, you're developing a person before a hockey player. And that's a massive piece. And what I love about what you just said, and you can see it on your face if you're watching this, is the reaction to the type of person they are. I mean, it really, really matters. And parents know you play a role in this. We always say on the show, you're not crazy. The youth hockey world is crazy, right? You're just having to navigate through that. Last one from me, because I know they're going to cut me off here soon. I really appreciate all the time, guys. It means the world to me. Again, look, born and raised in Philadelphia. I'd be amiss if I didn't ask a Philadelphia sports fan question. I do want to say the two greatest fan bases I've been involved with is Philadelphia and New York, right? When I got to work with the Rangers, that was a special time. But Philadelphia fans demand a high standard. They demand excellence. If you're not going to put that product out there, they're going to let you know about it. It's one of the unique things about our city. We've seen athletes like Bryce Harper fully embrace that. I loved Michkov getting off the plane in an orange Phillies hat. That was a brilliant move. I'm just going to assume he had it on. That's where we're going to go from that. I think sometimes fans can think, hey, the team doesn't really care about us. And I'll tell you what, Jonesy, in my experience in pro sports, that's so untrue. Teams really do care about that fan base for lots of different reasons, not just monetary. I remember a game years ago. I can't remember who we were playing, but it was a horrible storm outside. And people still showed up to the arena. I remember the Flyers were losing. I think Peter Laviolette was the coach at the time, and he went in the locker room between periods and basically said, you got 3,000 people that dredged through this horrendous weather to be here today. You better go win this game. And they did. I remember that because we heard about that in the post press conference. You talked about it a little bit earlier. Not that fans make decisions when it comes to players and ice time and anything like that, but how much does that aura of Philadelphia fandom play into how you operate this team as president?
Well, we respect them a lot, and I know them well, and I recognize that it's important that they're talking about the Flyers. Like, I think it's important that we're relevant, and I think in order to become relevant, we have to do things that they appreciate. We want to make sure that we're a tough, hardworking team that throws everything out on the ice and gives it everything that they have every shift. And I think John Tortorella is a great coach to send that message to our players. It's a city that is tough. It is a difficult place to play. We recognize that. It's not for everybody. And I feel very fortunate that Michkov has that type of attitude, that he's going to embrace playing in a tough city. He wants it. He wants to be recognized. He wants to be feeling like he's doing something really cool. And to him, playing in the National Hockey League is everything. The Phillies are a great example. You brought up Bryce Harper. Harper alone wasn't selling out stadium. Harper with a good team sells out the stadium every night. So it's one thing to have the star and do all you can with that star, but it's another thing to make sure that you have a good team that wins in Philadelphia. And for hockey, we have to go above and beyond that because of where we've fallen to in the pecking order. So we know where we're at. We know where we want to get to, and it's ultimately up to us to, help provide the type of product that our fans want to come out and see. So we love it. We loved playing in Philly. Both Danny and I, of course, were able to do that. Dan Hilferty grew up in Philadelphia, a fan of all sports. So there's a really strong connection and an open mind to exactly what we need to do to get there. So the fans do play a huge part in that.
It's a city where a guy will walk up to you with his shirt, rip it open, and show you a Flyers logo. Vic, I just bookended that for you beautifully. My friends, I really appreciate the time today. Team building, culture building is something, it's in my blood. It's what I believe in. All three of you exude that all the time. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you letting me come on and ask these questions today. It means the world.
Well, it was great. And I think just, the insight from your questions and, of course, Neil's experiences in New York and a career that's really gone over 4 decades. And Keith, your position with the Philadelphia Flyers, I think the insight and just to be able to do this in a relaxed atmosphere during the summer just has a real feel-good aspect to it. And it actually starts to get us prepared for the 2024-25 season. So, Lee, thanks so much for joining us today. And Keith, all the best as a new grandfather. And we look forward to seeing you down in Voorhees in September when the Flyers open training camp.
Thanks so much, guys. Really enjoyed talking to all three of you guys and appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All the best to little Nikita, and make sure he doesn't take his shoe off as soon as he gets one and bang it on the desk.
You know he will, Neil. You know he will.
This is the human side of the story brought to you by the Game 7 Group. Game 7 has a magic attached to it like nothing in sport. In order to prevail, teamwork is essential to achieving success. At the Game 7 Group, transforming individuals into cohesive teams is the core philosophy in their team building approach. Their belief is every team has potential to achieve extraordinary results. Game 7 Group offers various services to help teams accomplish their goals through specific team building events, coaching, and speaking engagements. These services are aimed at improving team dynamics, productivity, and overall performance. Face it, we all want to be able to succeed in the big moment. Check out the Game 7 Group website at game7group.com/NHL Wraparound to learn more. Right now, a special incentive offer awaits our podcast listeners. Take your team to the next step. The Game 7 Group will get you there. And welcome back to NHL Wraparound. You know, Neil, we had two great guests in Keith Jones and Lee Elias. And one of the things that, you know, you wanted to also stress was one really important yet somewhat unappreciated aspect about building a team and going to work.
Yeah, and that is it is the culture, but the culture has to be fun. And you can't really build a good culture without making sure that the people that are under you, that you're trying to lead, are also having fun. Now, they have to be accountable. You have to hold them accountable for whatever their duties are. But while they're doing their duties and everything is going along, make sure everybody has fun. Make sure you're making it so that people want to come to work, that they're excited to come to work in whatever you're doing. So fun, to me, is a really big part of leadership.
And there's nothing more fun than winning a Stanley Cup championship. And in our human side today, you're going to talk about really the differences in terms of how you built your Ranger championship team in 1994 and how Bill Zito did it for the Florida Panthers this year.
You know, Vic, I took a good hard look at how the Florida Panthers were built, because if you just go year to year and you're sort of focusing on 32 teams and then one team suddenly wins a President's Trophy, goes to the final, loses, goes to the final again and wins a cup, and you go, geez, it wasn't that long ago. They weren't very good. How did they do this thing? And so, you know, and in the years that I've been in the NHL, around 44 years now since I started with the Islanders, a lot of people just say very simply, how do you build a Stanley Cup winning team? It's obviously not that simple. It's a lot more complicated. But, you know, the NHL evolves in different ways. And so as the NHL evolves and the collective bargaining agreement changes, and people change, and Gen Z, Gen X, Gen whatever, different people are starting to become hockey players that don't have the same personalities and thought processes that we had in the 80s and 90s. And so you have to adapt to that. And there's a lot of different avenues that a GM can take to bolster the talent that's on your team. That's what a general manager is supposed to do. He's supposed to keep bolstering the amount of talent that his team has so that one day he can be the Florida Panthers. When I was building the 94 Rangers championship team, free agency wasn't even available. So we didn't have any free agents on that team at all. Believe it or not, everything had to happen either through the draft and development or trading. And, you know, the 24 Stanley Cup team, the Panthers, had 11 players on their roster that were acquired through free agency. 11. Now that's 24 30 years after we won it in 94, when there was no free agents. 30 years later, the team that won it had 11 free agents. So let's look at how the Panthers were built during the past 5 years. I think that's the right window of opportunity, how the Panthers got built in 5 years. Bill Zito, the general manager, he came to the Panthers in September of 2020. Dale Talon had been his predecessor with the Florida Panthers, and he left him some excellent building blocks. And you have to give him credit for this. Jonathan Huberdeau, Alexander Barkov, Carter Verhaeghe, Anton Lundell, Ryan Lumberg, and Sergei Bobrovsky were already in a Florida uniform when Bill Zito got on the scene. So that's pretty good building blocks that he's got it handed to him. But Zito took the foundation and crafted a team around that foundation. He made the blockbuster trade of Huberdeau going to Calgary for Matthew Tkachuk, which obviously anybody who watched the Florida Panthers know what a huge part Tkachuk played in that championship. Previously, in July of 21, Florida sent a first-round pick and Devin Levy to Buffalo for Sam Reinhart. And Sam Reinhart had the season of seasons this year, scoring 57 goals for the Florida Panthers and being a huge piece of their playoff run. A 2021 third-round pick went to Buffalo for Brandon Montour, who was a great staple of their defense for a third-round pick. Vlad Tarasenko and Kyle Okposo came to the Panthers through trades right at the deadline. Okposo probably being in his last season in the league. Tarasenko, having been on now his fourth team. Now he's re-signed in the summer with not re-signed, but signed in the summer with the Detroit Red Wings. He's gone, but still those were two important pieces. Zito even picked up two crucial pieces on waivers during his time in the last 5 years that helped the team win the cup. Gustav Forsling and Josh Mahura were both waiver pickups. I mean, this is where Keith Jones mentioned it. You got to have luck. And for those guys to appear on the waiver wire is luck. But then for you to know to grab them is skill and do it pushing the right buttons. So, even Rodriguez and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Dmitry Kulikov, Nico Mikkola, Kevin Stenlund, Nick Cousins, and Anthony Stolarz, those were all Zito signings. So how do you build a winner in the NHL? One, realize the good pieces you already have, like Bill Zito did. Two, make some intelligent trades as you build the team, which obviously Zito did. Three, do your research and sign the right free agents. That's really important. You make a blunder on a free agent, it can set you back. And the last one is get lucky. Get some players through waivers or falling in your lap. That's about what I researched, and that's about what you've got to build a winning team in the NHL. It's not easy, and certainly not everybody can do it, but Bill Zito, he did it.
As Barry Melrose said, if winning was easy, more teams would do it. And this was just, such a great way to put a bow on this show of team building and culture. So first, thanks to Keith Jones and Lee Elias for joining us today. Thanks to our sponsors, Migrate and the Game 7 Group. To our listeners, send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com. And don't forget, our website is nhlwraparound.com. All of our episodes are available on both audio and video. And during the rest of the month of August, we're going to be looking at player movement for all 32 teams over the course of 4 shows. We're going to share what we like, what we don't like, as teams continue to maneuver their rosters in preparation for training camp and 2025 regular season. On behalf of Neil, we'll see you soon.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.